welcome back to the Untitled Jack channel. My name is Todd. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to watch one more of my videos. Today I'm discussing the interview of Alec Baldwin by George Stephanopoulos one more time. Now, I covered some of his other comments that he made in a previous video, and you can see that video over here. And what I'm bringing up today is some additional comments that he made. So let's check out that interview.
In the aftermath of the shooting, a torrent of criticism.
People said to me, I got countless people online saying, you idiot, you never point a gun at someone. Well, unless you're told it's empty, and it's the director of photography who's instructing you on the angle for a shot we're going to do. And she and I had this thing in common where we both thought it was empty, and it wasn't. And that's not her responsibility, that's not my responsibility. Whose responsibility is remains to be seen.
Whose responsibility is it that the firearm had a round in it that he ended up shooting Halyna Hutchins? You gotta be kidding me. The buck stops at the guy who's holding the firearm. I don't care what you've been taught, where you've been educated, and what movies you have done, Alec Baldwin. You always confirm the firearm is safe yourself. You, and you alone, are responsible for every round that goes down range, whether they are blanks or an actual live round like this .223 round. He and he alone is responsible. And yes, he didn't follow the 4 rules of firearm safety, and he should have checked that firearm before he pointed it at her, and definitely before the trigger was pulled. Now, if you want to go down the road of the trigger pull one more time, I highly suggest you watch a video that was posted by John Snyder, where he covers the Colt Single Action Army and does a fabulous job on demonstrating how it can't go off without a trigger pull. And I would conclude that what Alec Baldwin actually did is had his finger on the trigger and had it pulled back when he was pulling on the hammer. So when he released the hammer goes forward and the gun goes bang. So he's responsible. It's disconcerting that he doesn't think he is.
There are some who say you're never supposed to point a gun at anyone on a set, no matter what.
Unless the person is the cinematographer who's directing me where to point the gun for her camera angle.
You're never supposed to point a firearm at somebody when you're on set. That, to me, seems a little bit difficult, a little bit challenging to do when oftentimes these action movies require, or even some dramas, require a firearm to be pointed in the direction of somebody. But in those situations, there should be absolute gun safety to where you know that firearm, whether it be like this FN57, completely unloaded, just so everybody knows, there's nobody that way and nobody on those sides, nobody up, no one behind me, no one down. I'm completely in an isolated area where there's nobody around. I'm also handling firearms that have no ammunition in them. They can't have any potential to going off. No rounds at all. And you know that it's completely safe before you point it at somebody. But even then, some of the safety rules of firearm safety would tell you not to point the firearm in the direction of a person. So you can still do a shot by changing the camera angle in such that it looks like they're actually pointing the firearm at somebody, similar to this, but you have it aimed off to the side, but from a side angle, it looks like the gun's pointed at the person. And that would be a good way to do firearm safety when you're actually using an actual firearm on a set and not just a whole completely plastic, non-firing, non-functioning prop gun.
That's exactly what happened. That day, I did exactly what I've done every day on that movie.
Which is what?
Which is that there's an armorer there, and that word is new to me. In the years I've been in this
What did you call it?
It was a prop guy or woman.
the word armorer was new to him? He's been doing movies for at least as long as I've been alive, to my knowledge. I'm sure there are plenty of other movies that I haven't seen, but my recollection of the first Alec Baldwin movie I ever saw was The Hunt for Red October, and then Mercury Rising. Those are two movies that I know off the top of my head that I've watched that he's been in. Of the movies he's done, that's about it. I've never really cared for the guy. I don't like his acting, so I typically don't watch things he does. But he's been on some live action sets like Mercury Rising, The Hunt for Red October, where firearms are in the movie. And you're telling me you've never heard of an armorer before?
And the prop person would come, and sometimes they would insist on demonstrating for you and the camera crew. They take the gun, if it was a contemporary gun, they show you the chamber, they show you the clip, they say, the gun is cold. And you look at it and go, thank you.
He states they come and show you the weapon and show you the clip. Now, this leads me to another problem. You can, if you know anything about firearms or have any firearm experience at all, you would know there is a big difference between a clip and a magazine. Let me demonstrate. This is a magazine. This is also a magazine. No rounds out of the FN57. That's a magazine. This is a magazine from an AR-15. It has one round, as you can see, so you can see how they fit down inside there, and they stack on top. So we'll move this around so it's completely clear. No rounds in that magazine. How does it go in an AR-15? Well, here's an AR-15. Has a barrel flag in it, so there's no rounds in the chamber, and it simply inserts into the magazine, slap it home with the butt of your hand, and now the magazine's in. Then you push the little button on the side, right there, and that releases the magazine. Show you one more time. Magazine in, push the button, ejects the magazine. That is a magazine. This is a clip. This is for a Mosin Nagant, a M39, anything of that nature that uses the Mosin Nagant action. Here's a clip for it. Here's another clip. This is a clip for a Mauser. Now, you've seen my Mauser before, right here. This is your K98 Mauser, and that's the clip for it. How does this one work? Well, I'm not going to completely demonstrate it, but I will show you to a degree. Open the bolt. In the top, right here, is the slot where you would put the clip. And then you would push the rounds down into the internal magazine. That's how a clip works. And then you would shut the bolt, and then the round would be live. Again, there's no rounds in this in the internal magazine. There's no rounds in the rifle. Completely safe. Now, clips can look differently, like the M1 Garand clip or the M1 Garand clip, however you want to call it. I don't own one, so I don't have one of those clips to demonstrate for you. But that's the difference. A magazine is self-contained, rounds inside it, go inside the gun somehow and stays locked in till you release the magazine, into which you can put a new magazine in place. A clip solely is to load an internal magazine. That is not removable in most cases. Again, it just shows his lack of firearm knowledge, which to me is very disconcerting, considering he spent his career acting and has been in numerous action movies and around firearms. One would think he would at least gain some knowledge to what a clip is and what a magazine is.
And in the 40 years...
Sometimes that would happen, not all the time.
Well, but no, sometimes they wouldn't demonstrate to me. Some insisted on demonstrating. They would do the demonstration for everybody there right before we rolled the camera, or rehearsed. Then there were others who they didn't do that because I trusted them to do the job. And again, this is not just me pointing a gun at somebody else, people pointing guns at me.
Well, that sounds like a typical safety aspect before you shoot a scene. I could see the armor coming up, showing you the gun. Here's the firearm. no rounds in the magazine, no round in the chamber, and you know the gun's safe, and then you go and shoot your scene, whatever you're doing, and you probably go through some sort of rehearsal to make sure the scene is the way it should be. And you know everybody's safe because the firearms are unloaded. Now, I would say it's safe to point at somebody, but again, that violates one of the rules. Only point a firearm at somebody or something that you're willing to kill, maim, and destroy. Otherwise, the barrel should always be pointed in a safe direction. So that's what they do. They demonstrate for him. Sounds like a safer environment than what he was working in presently. But again, I say the buck stops with him, and he should have done a safety check on that firearm himself before doing anything with a trigger and a hammer on the firearm. Making sure that either there's dud rounds in there, which kind of look like a real round, but wouldn't have powder and more than likely wouldn't have a primer.
Well, I've gotten shot and killed in films before where people had to shoot a flash round at me, and I trusted them to do their job. And in the 40 years I've been in this business,
where people have shot a flash round at me, he is absolutely correct. Of course, that's the way it works oftentimes in movie sets. We like to prefer to call them a blank. Not a flash round, it's a blank. It's basically a cartridge of ammunition minus the bullet with the front end of the cartridge crimped up to contain the powder inside, probably a lighter load of powder than what would be in your traditional round.
all the way up until that day, I never had a problem.
How many times do you think you handled a gun in those 40 years?
Oh, God, I don't know. I don't know. What amazes me is how many bullets, how many rounds of bullets do you believe have been fired on the sets of movies and TV shows in the last 75 years?
No idea.
Right. It could even be above 1 billion. You've had hundreds and hundreds of millions of bullets fired on the sets of films and TV shows, and 4 or 5 people were killed. Now, those deaths are tragic and abhorrent. And believe me, I would do anything in my power. I would do anything in my power to undo what was done. I don't know how that bullet arrived in that gun. I don't know.
He doesn't know how the bullet arrived in the gun. What's his point? I don't get it. It sounds like he's trying to pass the buck on to somebody else. Was not my fault. I didn't put the round in it. It doesn't matter how the round got there. He was ultimately responsible when he handled that firearm. I'm sorry. The buck stops with him. He's literally the last ditch check on a set before he plays with a hammer and pulls a trigger.
But I'm all for doing anything that will take us to a place where this is less likely to happen again.
Every single time I'm handed a gun on a set, every time, Mark, they hand me a gun, I look at it, I open it, I show it to the person I'm pointing it to, we show it to the crew. Every single take, you hand it back to the armor when you're done, you do it again. Right. Everyone does it. Everybody knows it.
Another actor I can't stand, George Clooney, but he makes a very good point. And that's something Alec Baldwin didn't do. And what George Clooney is pointing out is when you're handed a gun on a set that you're going to be pointing at somebody, the armorer shows you there's nothing in it. He looks himself to see there's nothing in it, and he says he shows it to the person he's going to point the firearm to, that there's nothing in it, before he points the firearm. Sounds like George Clooney at least has his head on right with that part.
How do you respond to actors like George Clooney who say that every time they were handed a gun, they checked it themselves?
Well, there were a lot of people who felt it necessary to contribute some comment to the situation, which really didn't help the situation.
That is exactly what I'm doing, and it's what others have been doing since this incident, because there's a loss of life that should not have happened. And it's a direct result of what I would refer to as your own negligence and checking that firearm and making sure it's clear before you play with a hammer and pull a trigger.
At all. You have if your protocol is you check the gun every time, well, good for you. Good for you.
Obviously not good for him. Obviously that's something he hasn't done. Makes you wonder if he's ever looked at a firearm when he's been playing with them in a movie, being Mr. Movie Star.
I mean, I probably handled weapons as much as any other actor in films with an average career.
Right. Handled many weapons in many movies. He's absolutely correct. I'm sure he has. And he's probably handled weapons in some cases maybe more than some other actors out there. So you would think he would have down how to handle that firearm and what the rules are related to that firearm. And checking that firearm himself.
Again, shooting or being shot by someone. And in that time, I had a protocol, and it never let me down.
Why did you choose in your 40 years not to check the gun yourself?
What I was taught by someone years ago was, as I said, if I took a gun and I popped a clip out of a gun or I manipulated the chamber of a gun, they would take the gun away from me and redo it. The prop person said, don't do that, when I was young. And they'd say, one thing you would need to understand is we don't want the actor to be the last line of defense against a catastrophic breach of safety with the gun. My job, they told me, man or woman, my job is to make sure the gun is safe, and then I hand you the gun and I declare the gun safe. The crew's not relying on you to say that it's safe. They're relying on me to say that it's safe. When that person who was charged with that job handed me the weapon, I trusted them, and I never had a problem.
Again, he's pushing the blame somewhere else other than him, because he says he trusts the person who hands him the firearm and says it's safe. I'm sorry, Alec Baldwin, you should have looked at that weapon yourself. Just imagine the outcome probably would be completely different had you actually done that and actually checked the firearm.
And this was from the beginning of your career?
From day one. There's one person that's supposed to make sure that what is in the gun is right and that what's wrong is not in the gun.
I'm sorry, but the buck still stops with him. It still stops with you, Alec Baldwin. You were the last line of defense, so to speak, when you're handling that firearm. And you should have quickly done a check. It doesn't take long. It takes a couple of seconds. Watch John Snyder's video and you will see how quickly you can spin through the Colt Single Action Army, or maybe in his case, I think he might have been using an Uberti, which is a clone of the Colt Single Action Army, but the functioning is the same. And it doesn't take long to check, and he should have checked.
One person has that responsibility to maintain the gun. And
what is the actor's responsibility?
I guess that's a tough question, because the actor's responsibility going this day forward is very different than it was the day before that. Yeah.
It sounds like, again, he's wanting to say it wasn't his fault. He's not responsible. I'm sorry, but you and you alone are the one handling that firearm on the camera, on the set. You should have checked it. Simple. You're responsible. The 4 rules of firearm safety. The last one being you're responsible for every round that goes downrange.
Now I can't. First of all, I can't imagine I'd ever do a movie that had a gun in it again. And I can't. When you say what is the actor's responsibility, the actor's responsibility is to do what the prop armorer tells him to do.
Yeah, I would agree. But you should also be the one checking that firearm one more time. No matter what they tell you, whether it's clear or not, whether they demonstrate and show you, you should check yourself. You're the one responsible when you're behind that trigger.
And we did not have a problem. I mean, I understand there was an accidental discharge at one point on the set of a blank round, but we did not have a problem for me until that day. Everything gets slowed down, Zapruder film-esque here. And the issue with that is there's only one question to be resolved, only one. And that is, where did the live round come from?
Is that really truly the question? It's not the question I have. The question I have is, why didn't you check the firearm before you pulled the trigger and dropped the hammer? That's the question I have. It's the only question I have. And I'm sure I'm not the only one with that same question. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Tell me what you think. I'd love to hear from you. Put your comments below. Take care. God bless. We'll see you next time. If you've made it this far in my video, I sincerely thank you for taking time out of your day to watch the entirety of my video. If you like my content, please hit the like button and turn your bell on. You'll receive a notification anytime I post a new video. Also, if you wouldn't mind, hit the subscribe button. You'll find the link up here. And feel free to watch one of my other videos that I will have pointed over here. Thanks again for taking time out of your day. It really does mean a lot that you would spend part of your day and your valuable time to watch one of my videos. Take care, God bless, we'll see you next time.